Welcome to Talks From Woodcreek. Today we're looking at Chapter 1.
Yeah, we have just debuted the very first episode of our wonderful new series that we've made in collaboration with Deborah Ann Woll and some wonderful new friends. And so today we're going to talk about and reflect sort of the DM player lessons that we can take away. I'll give you a little bit of a behind-the-scenes look at some of the choices and the or mistakes or comedy of errors that went behind that, and just have a little bit of fun looking at this whole project, because this has been probably the single most ambitious thing that we have ever had happen on our channel.
Possibly for me it was Dungeons and Dragons as well. I mean, we really tried to up the ante here. But I think, today we wanted to talk a little bit about that, like starting something and like what, in terms of like storytelling, as a dungeon master, how do you write your hook? As a player, how do you introduce your character? As a production or starting, like how do you kind of get something off the ground and start making it and hook people?
Yeah, and on that note, I actually think one of the biggest questions that I've seen coming from so many people that have responded to the trailer and the initial thing is, how did this even happen in the first place?
Yeah. Great question.
Well, it all started.
How did this transpire, and where did this all come from?
I mean, I think that we need to give credit to our producer at Gass-Donnelly, who kind of was the mastermind behind, I guess, pulling us together.
Certainly pulling us together. And I think even, I had written a version of Tales from Woodcreek years before I met Ed. And when he sort of said, you know what, I think I could get funding to like do a D&D show. Do you have any stuff? And I kind of pulled this out of the archives. And through our collaboration, it became something very different. I think pulling over a few of the specifics from that, like little puzzles and things that it had already created. But the story became something that he and I kind of worked out together, and some of it was like we would have a really fun idea about how we could surprise or engage players and go, well, great, what could we do? What could we get? And so if I look at something like the promo or the first episode or the first chapter of Tales, I go, Ed was like, you know what? There's this place, Black Creek Pioneer Village, and it feels very vibey to like my style, this kind of folk horror thing. And what if we were playing D&D in that location? So
I have some very surreal childhood memories of going to.
Of course, I would imagine most Torontonians would.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, it is a historic site in the Greater Toronto area, and it is used, like they do walking tours, a lot of school tours, and I can remember for myself what I think this must have been in like 8th grade or something like this, or because what my school used to do at the end of the years, we would have this educational trip to the Pioneer Village, and we had to get on a bus at 6 a.m. to drive from my hometown to the Pioneer Village, but then we would tour the village for a couple hours in the morning, and then they would take us to Paramount Canada's Wonderland, an amusement park.
So the Pioneer Village never actually felt that exciting because you were just waiting to go to Wonderland.
That's changed now, though, I bet.
Yeah, I mean, it is a really, really cool historic spot because, again, they have all the original buildings and everything like that, and doing the tours and really being both aware of both the history of like settler colonialism and also the Indigenous peoples of Canada and their use of the land as well. It's really cool to see that being brought into all that. So it's a really beautiful site, I think, and it really was like so immersive to just be in these historic buildings for this process.
I'll say that when we were jumping into Monty and I had no idea what was going on half the time. We just got brought into rooms, but the fact that we're doing this like haunted story in this old town, and then you actually are walking into these old historic buildings, it had the vibes. I was a little creeped out sometimes. So but
we
that was
utilized
great.
that hopefully.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always been a huge fan of like living history, and that people like the old craftspeople who keep, not that the old crafts, not that the people are old, but that keeping these kind of old crafts and these old, art's really alive, and how do you make something, with an old printing press or an old loom or these. And I always love to go and learn how we did these things throughout the years, and how some of them were more sustainable and others were not, and what lessons do we bring forward and what do we leave in the past. And so I think for me, on some level, in a way, I'm almost trying to do the same thing with D&D, which is that I don't want to just learn how to use a loom. I want to go someplace where I can use the loom. You know?
A really wild thing also occurred to me that in a lot of my theater studies, we studied a lot of site-specific theater.
Sure.
Which is where a theatrical production is set in a non-traditional venue, so where you would go to watch a play. I think in some cases these are ones where it would be set in an abandoned hotel or in a school, and sometimes it involves the audience actually moving through the site, so it has this very immersive experience because the building that it's taking place in is the natural set and the environment, and there's often this environmental storytelling that is happening, and it's so powerful because I think that you have this, it fades into the background, but it's also permeating everything that's around you at the same time. And often, like, I'm someone that academically, because of my theater background, I'm often very suspicious of the word immersive. Because oftentimes it's a word that means very different things to different people.
Yes, I think that's very important.
And it often is used like a buzzword that without a lot of thought, right? Because one of the things that I value a lot with the medium of role-playing games in general is that you can have an immersive experience just by putting on a pair of headphones
100%.
and listening to an audiobook, right? Because your imagination is so powerful. But I think one of the really interesting things about being in a space and being in an environment is that your senses are absorbing so many things that your sensation is happening, your brain isn't necessarily aware of it. Like, one of the things that I think is interesting about Woodcreek specifically is their smells.
Yeah.
Right? There's the smell and the temperature of being in that environment, and it was such a contributing factor in such an understated way to that feeling of immersion, because there's more sensations that are being engaged.
And I'll ask you, because I think so much of us are used to playing D&D at a table, but we were like, what are the unconventional ways? We very specifically, and you'll see as you continue to see more of the show, we were like, what are unconventional setups and ways we can make them? Like, we made you sit at school desks.
Yes.
And I said, how is that going to shift our experience? If you have to sit at the desk, what memories, sensations does that bring up? How does that change how you interact with the game? I'm curious if that had an effect.
Well, what's really interesting is there's sort of this, previously when I would think of immersion, I would use it as a word to describe, when Monty and I would play at this table. And for me, the immersion was like making sure that I was in character the whole time. What I thought was really interesting is I felt extremely immersed when we were doing Woodcreek. Like, I'm sitting at a desk, and you can't not feel like you're in a school building because you are in a school building. And even though I think I break character more than I ever have playing a tabletop game because things are so physical and I'm actually engaging with an environment where Kelly keeps coming out rather than my character Valentine. But at the same time, the immersion is still so present because you can't break away from the fact that you are in a school building dealing with, like, sitting at a desk, dealing with tangible objects around a schoolhouse. And I mean, you were standing at the front as the teacher. And so all of that is just happening. So it is this level of immersion that even when I'm losing my character, it's still an immersive experience.
Okay, so here's one of the things that I want to speak to, the discipline of the seating arrangement and what it did for me as a player. So a school, especially a traditional schoolhouse, where all the children's desks are facing the front, is actually a way of spatial organization that is enforcing a type of discipline where all the students are facing their attention to the front. And when you're in school, and I'm sure anyone that, like, if you've been in that classroom where the act of turning to your left to look at one of your fellow students, that is an act of you are making mischief, and turning your back to the so for me, because I was sitting in front of Anjali and Aman,
Right.
I had to turn around and face away from you, Deb,
Yeah.
to talk to the other players. And so I felt very much in like this, oh, I'm like rebellious. I am being the rebellious student, just talking to the other players because I'm facing away from you. And so that spatial relationship was very palpable for me in the moment of playing in such a unique way. Whereas when you're sitting around a D&D table, especially like, I don't know if you can, the experience of sitting around a circular table versus a rectangular table, because there is this whole notion of like space creates authority, and a schoolroom creates this interesting type of authority that like you both embodied as the GM, but also in playing the school teacher ghost, right? It just felt like everything we were doing was an act of rebellion.
Well, literally that, this first half of this particular game and setup is about that. She believes you are students, and your job as players is to rebel in some way, that you have to rebel in order to get the information that you want. So I love that that's the experience that you had. And I do think it brings up like, there are different types of immersion and different, and like a lot of people ask me like, oh, I how do I make my table or my game more immersive? And I'm like, depends on your players and you. Like, what do you all find immersive? What I find immersive might not be what your players find immersive.
Yeah.
And also, like, as you said, like sometimes it's about immersion for players as much as it's about immersion in story, right? So, I think I particularly love bringing players out as much as characters come out. And so for me, it's a real joy to see the delight in what like Ed and I spent all night last night cooking up and creating. Like, I want to see you guys smile, and I want to see Victor and Valentine engage with the space.
Yeah. And I mean, when I think of immersion, I mean, obviously people at home are looking at this and probably being like, well, I can't go to an old haunted village to run D&D with my players. But, even I'll never forget just starting D&D, and Monty would have like handouts. There was one of our earliest sessions of D&D ever. You had the goblins coming into town, and you were like, they're chanting a song, and you handed us all the lyrics to the goblin song and had us sing the goblin song, which was ridiculous. And like, we were all doing funny goblin voices,
my God,
but like,
I love it.
that was my first instance where that was very much an invitation to like let go and just be immersed in the story. So, immersion looks like so many different things, like you said. And I think handouts, candles, music, whatever it is. Some people don't like music, some people do.
Well, I think as we're talking about literally just changing your venue, it doesn't have to be go to a haunted house. It can literally be go to your living room. It can be make people sit on the floor in a circle. It can be, how can you switch up how people are feeling or sitting by just changing location. I've had games where I've given people treasure hunts, and it was literally like, get up and go to my living room and dig in the potted plant to find something that I buried there, And so you can do a lot of the things that we're doing on the show just in your own.
Yeah, and I think one of the things with immersion is immersed in what?
Right.
Because, and I think that's why saying I want my players to feel immersed is an incomplete sentence. I would offer that some of the layers of immersion that you could consider are, do you want the players to be immersed in their characters?
Right.
Do you want them to be immersed in the story?
Right.
In the world/environment?
Or in the experience?
Or yes, or the experience, or immersed in the game.
Yeah.
And I think something about the word immersion does imply like a sense of the everyday melting away temporarily. There is definitely a sense that when you are immersed, you are maybe not lost, but you definitely are feeling more attached, and
you are
in what you're experiencing.
I always like to use the word presence, that we are the most immersed when we are the most present. And that can be, sometimes character can bring you there. You can be so immersed in this moment of character that other things melt away and you are present with only this character moment. It can be a plot moment. It can be environment. It's whatever brings you into the here and now, so that you're not thinking about your laundry, you're not thinking about, your grocery list. The only thing that is running through your mind is what's happening right now.
Yeah.
And I would argue that as an actor, my experience is that character and person exist at the same time. there is no separation.
Yeah.
It isn't about I am Deborah or I am, Kiki the human fighter. I am always both when I'm playing.
Yeah, there's this whole theory of like, in live theater, when you're watching, you are seeing several layers of reality occurring simultaneously. Because like if you are watching, I don't know, I just always use Hamlet because this is always the example. When you are watching Hamlet, you are seeing both the actor or actress playing Hamlet as a human being. You're seeing the character of Hamlet, but you're also seeing the act of someone pretend to be someone else. And there's all of these different layers that are happening, and we kind of like accept. There's that phrase, the willing suspension of disbelief, that you are seeing this, but those are all happening simultaneously.
Well, what's really interesting is I think we've had many conversations about this, but when you're watching an actual play, even one even more so Woodcreek, because there's even more layers here, you're watching us as personalities, as people, show up to engage with this game. We're being put into an environment that we've never experienced before. And we have to tangibly interact with that environment. So you're watching people tangibly interact with an environment. You're also watching those same people play a game as different characters.
Right.
And you're also watching confessionals happening, and there's this layer of production and television. So like we're on set, there's cameras pointed at us, there's lights. And so, the people at home are watching this multi-layer reality TV show with both a game that's occurring and with tangible escape room and regular old human beings just engaging with that. And there's so many layers to that are occurring.
And I would say the key ingredient, and we've harped on this a lot, and our DMing advice though is that you have to have trust.
Yeah, you do.
And everyone has to feel a certain degree of that trust is part of what makes people feel safe to be immersed. Because I think that one of the things that if you have players that are hesitant about immersing themselves in their characters or your world and your story, I think for a lot of conventional people is like the act of role-playing is a little bit silly.
Yeah, it is.
And I think that for many players, especially those who are new to role-playing games, there can be this feeling that if you lose yourself in the character, if you start talking in the silly voice, that someone's going to make fun of you.
Yeah.
And even for us in Tales of Woodcreek, there is that moment of like, are we going to be genuinely scared by a jump scare or something like that? Or are we going to feel unsafe? And so there is this measure of trust of knowing that something might scare you, something might jump out, but nothing's going to actually hurt you.
Well, I always talk about that like a haunted house or a roller coaster or a scary movie, right? We sign up to be scared all the time, as long as we know that genuinely we are safe. Right? Then it gives you the freedom to be scared.
And I want to give props to you. Like Monty and I were a little nervous arriving on the first day. We didn't know what we were walking into or what to expect, but you really fostered an environment of trust. And every time, we will actively see me multiple times throughout the show get scared, but it was always like you were just there to be like, great job. Yeah. And that always, knowing that it ended with Deb saying, great job, you were like, this was so fun, that always was rewarding and made me feel like I was prepared for the emotions or the fear or any little jump scare that would happen. I was prepared for all of that because I am on camera and I am with friends and I want those authentic reactions because I trusted everybody involved.
I think for me, it's that little bit of even though there are surprises, I really I would never call it a prank, right? My goal is never to fool or make fun of. My goal is only to delight. Yeah. And sometimes a little jump scare is a way to delight. I am delighted when because there's something about fear in particular, and I think it's part of the reason I love scary movies, is that if you want to talk about presence, when something scares you, it means it's actually really gotten inside and shifted something. It has immediately brought you to the present moment in a way that very little else does. You can watch things that are beautifully, dramatically performed, and you're still a little bit passive and on the outside. But if something scares you, it's immediately brought you into this moment.
Yeah. I think whether it was just the knocking ghost noises or the book flying off the shelf, those kind of, and I think as well for the notion of fear is that like it's amazing how it only takes something small like that to do it as well, to create that thing of just something that is just slightly unexpected.
Yeah.
I like how long it took us to realize that the knocking was something. I was just like, yeah, it's an old building. There's a knock, and then it took a while to be like, why does the knocking keep happening? Like, that was a great. As the first episode, I thought that the journey, because again, in future episodes we are more aware of, but like that was our first experience, and so realizing that we had to engage with the knocking, with like that there would be these elements of the environment that we would have to get up and engage with was such a unique and fun discovery to make while
like
we were
give
sitting
yourself permission to engage with the world in that way.
So you had a lot on your plate as well with this first episode, because you had to introduce the world of Woodcreek, introduce the characters, and just introduce this entire concept.
Right.
So what did your prep look like? Oh my God.
I mean, we will have a much deeper conversation about all of that in terms of like more the logistics of creating the show once we get to the end and we can talk about more. But I will say, I'm a big believer in learning by heart. So to me, that's different than memorization, right? Like memorization is something that you do for a test. Learning by heart is the way you know the lyrics to your favorite song. And that's always how I believed in terms of learning my lines for a piece of work or something like that. And so for me, it's that I have such vivid images of this story and these places and these NPCs and these monsters and where we're going, that I don't actually have to memorize anything. Because if you ask me a question, oh, I know what that looks like. And I can just telepathically through my words try to put the image that's in my head into your head. So that kind of prep just takes a lot of what I call it constructive daydreaming, and it's literally just sitting around and daydreaming and thinking about like, oh yeah, what would be in that corner and what kind of books would be on that shelf? Oh, interesting, you know, and you kind of, it's not a list I've written down or anything that I've memorized. I just know generally the kind of things, and then in the moment it can be improvised with ease because it's like describing my own bedroom.
Yeah.
So there's that preparation. Then obviously there's like monster stats, and I like to customize everything. So a lot of times I might start with a base stat, but very quickly through customizations, it becomes something else.
I mean, that's our Frankenstein method that we use, where we take.
We've done a whole monster book now that uses that.
100%. I think that's always the best way to take something. Even just changing the damage type on something can give a monster an entirely different flavor.
Yes, and it's way less work than building something completely from scratch. Because I think the most powerful thing about starting with a monster stat block is that the math is at least done for you, and you just know, okay, everything about this monster is a +5.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right?
Easy. So there was that, and then obviously we had all of the prep of props and things like that to do. And I think I was nervous because this had a lot of like cues for camera operators, cues for, Ed backstage who was running some of our other special effects and things like that. And in D&D, there are no cues. So I couldn't say, hey, when they say this, because we didn't have them, I just had to be like, you'll start to feel like we're moving into this next section because they've discovered this.
Well, that actually is a great question, is you're bringing in this group of players, some of which have never played D&D before.
Yes, Amon's first time.
Amon's first time, she was amazing.
Oh my God.
But, from that very opening scene where, we walk into that one room with the three of us, and you're kind of laying out the plot of Woodcreek.
Our little hook,
So first of all, what were some of your ideas to like, let's get the story started, let's get the characters in and engaged, and then how did you manage to like, at least I never felt like I was being wrangled in any specific direction, but at the same time, knowing how much there was going on afterwards, it's like clearly we had to hit certain notes or beats, but we were just going with the flow. So how did you manage that?
So some of it I think is making the right things appealing, right? So some of it is like you want to make sure there are hooks within the story that your characters and your players are pretty naturally going to be drawn to. Maybe that's by making something out of place. I think people, characters are often drawn to that. I often do, at least at the beginning of a story, I think like our thing was break the curse, so it's a personal need, recover the riches, so there's a monetary need, and save the town, which is like a heroic.
Yeah.
So the idea is that like no matter who someone's character is and what they're motivated by, I've given you a reason, one of these 3 reasons, to make you want to go to this town and solve this problem.
I mean, even by putting the tattoo on our hands, we immediately, it doesn't matter, like you said, my character has this thing that you've explained was a curse. And so it's like, okay, well, that's a problem. And so by presenting the opening of being like, all your characters have this and you need to get rid of it, and this is the way that you're going to do it, is arriving here and figuring it out.
Eldritch contamination of our dark fantasy world of Drakkenheim is spreading.
No, I thought we fixed that last time.
No, not at all, because it is spreading to a brand new game system.
This is Dungeons of Drakkenheim, the Daggerheart edition, and this is a way to experience Drakkenheim like never before.
Yes, so this episode of Tales from Woodcreek is sponsored by Dungeons of Drakkenheim, Daggerheart, which is launching on Kickstarter on November 4th.
Yes, we are bringing our dark fantasy world of Drakkenheim to a new system. And when we first built the world of Drakkenheim, we wanted to create a world that feels alive, chaotic, and dangerous, and full of heart. And Daggerheart is the perfect way for it.
Now in Daggerheart, it just lives and breathes the way that we always imagined Drakkenheim doing. This is our Emmy award-winning dark fantasy adventure rebuilt for a brand new system where players are going to really drive the narrative.
Yeah, and the Dungeon Dudes and Ghostfire Gaming are even teaming up with Darrington Press to bring Drakkenheim into Daggerheart. So if you ever walked those haunted streets, and I have, you know that every step already feels like a roll of the dice between hope and absolute fear. So to make it all work seamlessly, they've brought in Daggerheart contributing author Mike Underwood to help ensure the mechanics of Daggerheart feel right at home in this new version of Drakkenheim.
Yes, the fear will reign in Daggerheart because the city of Drakkenheim itself is your enemy. Every ruin and mutation fuels your GM's power.
And hope dies. Factions rise and fall as your party's choices shape the fate of Drakkenheim.
Fate calls. Power always has a price. Will you embrace Eldritch contamination or let it consume you?
This is the world we dreamed of sharing, and now it's yours to explore in a completely new way.
So you can follow the Kickstarter right now to help us unlock free miniatures of our original Drakkenforce characters that will be added to every pledge. You get the STLs for digital and the physical minis for a physical pledge. And if we hit our goals before we launch on November 4th, those will be added to every pledge.
So click the link in the description below right now. Drakkenheim and Daggerheart is waiting for your story.
I just find it very effective as a player to have a really strong motivation or selection of motivations provided to me by a GM. I really find that that helps me anchor where I'm coming from my character, because one of the things that I always find whenever I do sit down to play is, because I don't get to play very often, is that the scope of where I can go is massive. Right. And even in coming into this, like I literally had a character of every class, and I was like, I don't know how am I going to pick one of these? And so I did have to come back to, okay, so what is a cool motivation? What is a cool drive? And that's where like Kelly and I are in talking about the connections between our characters that we could have. That really helped narrow it down for me.
Well, I'm a big believer in structure within story, but I think to me exactly what you're describing is that it's easier to paint within a border. If you have endless canvas, where do you start? Where do you stop? What are you trying to say? So I feel like my job, again, people play differently, but for me, my job is to give you the border, and then you have absolute free reign to paint inside that border. I don't decide what you do inside. Now I know what's in there. Like let's say the border is the schoolhouse, right? It's the walls of that schoolhouse. I know what's hidden there. I know what books are on the shelf. I know who the monsters are that live there and inhabit there. But how you engage with each of those is entirely up to you guys. I've given you the border.
I mean, when we do talk about like engagement and pushing us through the narrative, it's so obvious though that if there's knocking happening, we're going to start to pay attention to that. If a book flies off a shelf, we're not going to be like, I'm not going to pay attention. Like, no, and so in a way, those are the tools. A lot of the prop work,
Yeah.
a lot of the like. As soon as any of the elements came out that were very obviously part of the story, it was an invitation. And I mean, I say any good TTRPG player knows when an invitation is being given
Yes.
to you and knows to go along
Yeah.
with it.
Follow
It is
the thread.
Our job to follow the
Yes, it is your
thread.
job to bite on that plot
Yes.
hook.
Yeah.
Well, even like that, like, so we had this incredible prop that you saw in the episode where you could talk to Tommy the ghost, the spirit of Tommy.
Right.
And I, as the GM, can't control Tommy. I don't know what questions you're going to ask. I know what Tommy's story is. So we have to have some kind of intelligence behind this crazy cool prop. So that was Ed behind the scenes. There's your behind the curtain look, because he knows the story as well as I do. And it was fun because we just got to go, all right, we don't know what they're going to ask, but you're going to answer. And it ended up being this really fun thing for me to watch because I'm now like, great, tell me the story of what's happening here. So again, I think another opportunity to say, you know, I always liken it to Bob Ross, because I used to watch a lot of Joy of Painting. So like he knows he wants to paint a mountain, he knows how to paint a mountain, but he actually doesn't know what that mountain's going to look like until he puts the knife to the canvas and just kind of lets himself feel it out and lets him see what the knife does, right? How does the knife affect how it goes? And I often think about that in terms of kind of storytelling arts. You know what kind of story you want to tell, you know how to tell story, but until you're in the moment, you're not exactly sure how that story is going to come.
So was there something in the episode that we in chapter 1 that was an example of that? Like what was something? What was it? Was there an unexpected direction or
To
turn?
remember back now. I mean, you definitely found things in a different order than we anticipated. Again, which is live, and I think that's part of it. Is like sometimes that question, I didn't plan for you to do anything in a certain way, so I kind of can't. Nothing can kind of go out of order or out of sync because I didn't decide. I think Miss Vickers had a lot of information, and you guys were not interested in getting information out of Miss Vickers.
We would rather smite.
Kind of, which was fine. Again, you're like, she didn't have anything that you couldn't get another way in terms of moving the story forward. But Miss Vickers is a font of information about Woodcreek and the people who lived there and what happened that night and what happened to Tommy and all this stuff. And it's always interesting to me that, again, I think as a DM, you have to be really quick and be like, great, burn it up, let it go.
I mean, both Monty and I have had so many experiences running games where you prep like entire sheets of information, and then the players just never engage with it, and that's just something you have to accept as a DM. That like, you might have prepped an entire encounter that they just didn't ever touch, but I think that's kind of the beauty of it. That lets it remain authentic.
It lets it remain authentic. And I think as a DM, the way that you cover yourself in that is that, yes, there should never be only one way for your players to get information. And if you find yourself in a situation where, oh, oops, that was the only way, put it somewhere else. Like, you are allowed to make those shifts on the fly, in order to make sure that your players are having the best, most exciting experience that we can all create in this moment.
Yeah, there often is a temptation to invoke the dice.
Yeah.
And sometimes around critical, like mission critical things, you kind of have to go, instead of making the die roll about are they getting the information or are they not, sometimes the die roll has to be about how much information are they getting.
Or how they get it, right?
Yeah.
They get the information, but there's a consequence.
Yes.
Right? I've always really loved that anything that's critical, they will get it, but all right, so you rolled badly on this one. Now I'm going to put it behind something that will hurt you.
Yeah, like with a ghost, you've got such an easy avenue there because like you can then have the ghost gives you the information, but you take psychic damage.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, or necrotic damage because it's about were you able to get the information in a safe way rather than and I think you ran into a bit of that.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I mean, I did not roll well or make good choices. It's I was playing a reckless bard. I like playing reckless characters,
Me
and
too.
I just go in. I thought what was really fascinating is like given the freedom of it, the one thing, is again we go back to the players versus the characters, but I didn't know going in what my actual what the character relationship was. Monty and I had talked a little bit about our relationship, and we had like 1 or 2 sentences with Anjali. I think one of the most magical things to come out of the show, and it even starts in episode 1, is Anjali and I just like role played in the moment and
it was
suddenly
not planned. I know.
established this dramatic.
Yeah.
And we ended up surprise, we filmed the session 0.
The promo.
The
prequel.
promo. It wasn't really it was the prequel, but we filmed that after.
Yeah.
And Anjali and I were like, we need to get a moment in here where we establish what ends up accidentally being established through the show, because we established this sort of like, there's tension here and like we kind of built that throughout. You'll see it build throughout the show, but Anjali and I just had such a blast exploring that. Yeah. And then in between episodes, we'd be like, okay, what's going on with our characters? And then, and like even our relationship, it's like we had a loose idea, but watching it come out in those moments was just such a treat to see that grow and expand.
I mean, I would even say like, one of the challenges I think with any character is that I find this myself as a player in particular when I do get to play, and I do find it too as a GM, is that it can take a couple game sessions before you find your character's voice. Yeah. Like sometimes you actually have to go through.
Too. I think you shouldn't nail anything down. You should be open to like discovering who your character is a little bit. Continue.
Yeah, and it's a process of development, right?
I always say that I know exactly who my character is when I start a game until I roll my first one, and then I realize that I need to like reassess a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is an interesting thing, is that the game definitely, the dice rolls when they don't work.
I'm going to play this confident acrobatic, and then like you roll and you're like, oh no,
I guess I'm not. Yeah.
Now I have to figure out who they are when they fail, like in this moment, and that I think is when your character comes alive. It's in the flubs, the failures, and the fact that at any table. I said this about Drakkenheim, but I actually think it's becoming something that I'm much more aware of, is you walk into a game session with your character up here, and then as soon as you present it outwards, that character becomes part of the shared storytelling of everybody at the table. How people react to you, how people, like the moments that you have with the other characters, the dice rolls, all of it then begins to take what you thought you had up here and meld that and shape that into something completely new that you weren't expecting.
I think as well the other thing, speaking of like immersiveness, and I think a fun duality that was happening, especially for Woodcreek, is like, I love solving puzzles. I love engaging with environments. I love it when I can break things, and I definitely like to solve puzzles in non-linear ways as well. So for me, I had to also deal with the fact that like I'm playing a paladin that is very like strength-based, like physical of a character that I'm trying to embody, but at the same time, like Monty wants to be clever about things, and like Monty wants to solve the puzzle, but I also do have like a destructive impulse, and I'm the type of person that gets kicked out of escape rooms because I will rip the carpet up and like pull things apart, because that's just the type of like player I am and you've encountered that before, where it's like I love it when I can like I think we had this in our Daggerheart game recently, where we were exploring a haunted house in a Daggerheart game.
You ripped the door off the hinges and threw it off a cliff. And I was like, why? And you're like, because ghosts love to slam doors. And I was like, that's actually smart.
Right. And so that's the type of player I am, where it's like rip the door off its hinges, pull everything apart, and being in an environment, I think, and I wonder how much this is. There was a couple times where I'd be like, can I smash these?
No, I have this distinct memory of before we filmed anything, you asked Deb, you were like, okay, so I'm going to try to break everything. And I remember the conversation being very much like, we are going into a historic building. It will be very clear to you.
Yes.
And also the props took a lot of work.
Yes.
So just, we will let you know if you're being too hard on them. Yeah. And I remember you being like, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
We would be very clear, and also again, it's edited, not to change things, but to just get rid of some shoe leather in it. And so if there were moments where we're like, oh, by the way, Monty, Victor, please don't tear this apart, But I also think but the fun thing about combining escape room with D&D in this sense is that we can actually kind of do both. I can give you a real puzzle that can be solved a real way. But instead of you actually destroying it, you go, can I destroy it? And I go, great, roll a perception check.
Yeah.
Right? I can take us from reality into imagination land and let you do both. Because then if you were to roll very high and I go, you actually do see a seam in it. You can tear that thing apart, make a strength check. Then I can go, all right, I solve it and I open it. We can bypass it in the way that you want to by out of the box thinking without actually destroying something that was really beautifully made.
well, I thought it was great that, like, on the flip side of the destructive nature, I can be good at certain puzzles and I'm bad at other puzzles.
Yeah.
And there were moments that it was like, well, now my limitations on solving this puzzle are Kelly, not my character. But then you would offer the opportunity to roll an investigation check to find a clue. And that's just a very helpful way of, like, we're dealing with a physical object, but we also get to use the mental capabilities
D&D
of our
skills.
character in order to help solve that problem. And I think you combine those elements really, really well in a way that allowed us to feel like we could tangibly solve a puzzle, but also that we were still playing D&D.
Yeah, to do both. I think the last thing I'm sort of curious about in terms of like character creation and bringing your character, we added this element of like the confessional chair, which is like giving you another opportunity to flesh out character, to flesh out decisions that you've made, that I think is really interesting because it means, one, the action of the story doesn't necessarily have to pause in order to have an introspective moment. We can kind of keep going through, and now we can cut to a confessional chair where you get to say, oh my God, in this moment, this is what I was thinking or feeling. And I'm curious for you, like, what was that experience getting to kind of augment your game with this sort of pre and post
It felt
discussion?
like a lot of like, I've never done the whole thing where you keep a character diary, but it felt like a really interesting way of doing that. And I think that actually, I think that for people that wanted to draw some inspiration from this, if you're not the type of player that would normally do a written character diary,
Right.
but like, if you just open the audio notes app on your phone and reflect a little bit in character, that could be a really interesting takeaway for like just recording your character's journey in an interesting way.
Very
I'm very
bardic.
curious. I'm very curious to know what everyone else's confessionals are. I think that'll be be
That's
the
true.
fun thing
You
to
don't
watch
know
back
yet,
about because I don't know what Kelly said and
Me
what,
neither.
and everybody. That's kind of the fun thing about it.
I do want to talk about that, actually. So for me, there is a really heavy pro and a very small con to the confessional chair. And that is, like Monty said, it is like a retrospect on your character. Like, we would answer questions like, how was Valentine feeling during this event? And I got to really reflect on that. And so, in a way, you're bringing your individual character to the forefront in those conversations and getting to explore, some of the things that you wouldn't even get to say normally in a D&D game about where their head was at, how they're feeling. But the thing that I realized that was important for me to actually bring into the games as role-playing was the connection between characters.
Sure.
So by being in the confessional chair, what you actually can't do is build the dynamic of the characters with one another. Yeah. So I could talk about how I'm feeling about Anjali's character or Monty's character, but again, it's where you had to bring those moments of like Monty and my relationship together was more important than me role-playing Valentine's mood or feelings.
Yeah, inner monologue in this moment.
And not to spoil it too much, but I feel like even in the second, in this, well, for us was the second day of filming, but it's the third and fourth episodes. Like by then we'd found the flow, like started to find a flow with one another, because this was also our first time getting to play with Anjali
Yeah.
as well, right? And so I think that we started to find that vibe as well. And this is one of the interesting things about like with any new group together, right? And I think that that's a very interesting difference for Kelly and I in particular, because you know, we come from Drakkenheim, where we've been playing with the same people for 7 years in one campaign, but then we've been playing with them for years prior, and so you take for granted the shared language and knowledge of one another that you have, and so that always is a fun process of discovery when you're playing with someone new for the first time, and even getting to play with you as a GM for the first time. I felt I learned so much about your style.
Totally.
And I played with I played with so many different GMs where, you know, you kind of start to see, all right, this is the category that you fall into. Like I think on one of the days,
you were telling me about
what class are you as a
DM, because you'd done that special.
Yeah. And once you kind of go, okay, so this is your class, and I know a little bit more what to expect. I think is such a for me a lot it's part of that like trust building thing of like, okay, now I've gotten to know how you run your game, how everyone else is at the table, and then you all start to find that flow, which really makes it special.
Well, I want to thank you guys for that trust, for hosting all of this on your channel and your space. That's such a huge vote of confidence that I don't take lightly. So thank you so much for that.
It's been a treat.
And I think, you know, this was new on so many levels. We hadn't played together before. You hadn't played with Anjali before. This was up on your feet. This was stories that you had no idea we were doing. And I think even for Ed and I don't know that I've seen this kind of storytelling in this space before, with this kind of, you know, new way of kind of blending genres and blending mediums. And so I think we all jumped into this with going, this is kind of an exciting new space, and let's experiment and see how far we can push it and see where we need to then pull back. And I don't know, thank you all so much for coming on this wild ride with us, and we can't wait for you to see the rest.
Yeah, it's going to continue. We're going to premiere the episodes every Friday, so get ready for Chapter 2 coming this Friday. But it really was, like, all of us got scooped out of our comfort zones and are trying something new, and it's really magical to see it all come together.
And it's wonderful to have you along for the ride with us, so be sure to check out Tales from Woodcreek. There's 8 episodes in total. They'll be airing every Friday right here on the Dungeon Dudes YouTube channel at 6 p.m. Will be the premieres through November and December. And then please make sure to watch all the episodes so that maybe we can do even more.
Ooh, yay.
Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.